Walk with me through the cellar door.
A storm is coming, Francis.
A portal to a more skeptical world.
Cellar Door Skeptics begins right now. Prepare for the revolution with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna.
In a world that we live in, there is an individual named Donald Trump. Donald Trump is running for president. A national figure, a figure that's been on TV, a figure that has polarized the United States of America, not just recently, but through his bankruptcies, through his awful TV shows, and his blatant sexism. Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. If you don't know who we are, go back and check out all 10 of our other episodes, because we have 10 fucking, yes, explicit tag included here.
Immediately.
10 fucking episodes where we bring you all sorts of goodies. We talk politics, we talk religion, we talk feminism. Hell, even tonight we're going to talk libertarianism. And I go, why? Because I considered myself a socialist libertarian, but you'll find out later I heavily disagree with the libertarian point of view. But that's some foreshadowing, or maybe it's just me giving away the episode before we even need to give the episode away. Make sure you enjoy.
It's like when the news station says, "Are you drinking something poisonous?" Find out at 11.
Well, that's what we're doing. If you think Chris is a libertarian, because I've been accused of it through mail, find out at 11 o'clock tonight. No, actually, just find out in the next half hour. But we got to open up with something that touches my heart. Right? Something that actually bothers me. Something that's come up at work, that comes up in all our personal lives. We have to recognize some of the, I don't know if you want to call it political cadavers, because Donald Trump is ripping them up, man. He's taken out some of those Republicans, and he's escalating in the polls. And at first, I wasn't concerned. At first, it wasn't this big thing like, oh no, yeah, who cares? It's beginning polls. Trump's popular. He's got a lot of money. He's put a lot of effort into making himself popular in whatever sort of sense that is. But now it's December. We're months away from the Republican convention, and Trump's leading in the polls. And to me, that's a concern. To me, that's something I want to stop and go, well, hold on, let's analyze this. What is this going to do for us? I won't tell you who I'll vote for. You can go back to past episodes and listen to see if you can figure out who Chris is going to vote for. And not Chris Hanna, because we all know he's on his knees with Bernie Sanders. But you can go back and try and figure out which candidate I'm going to vote for. But the biggest issue here, right, is that the Republican Party has split Democratic votes before. The Republican Party has come to the table and said, hey, you know what? We're here and we're real. But they've got Donald Trump this time. And so what I want to talk about a little bit here as we bring you into the show, as we get into a very heavily political show tonight, is the fact that if Donald Trump gets the Republican nomination, what that will do to the voting system. And if he doesn't and runs as an independent, basically as a Republican independent, what is that going to do to the Republican vote? Will it institute people voting one way? Will it institute them voting another way? And so I wanted to get Chris Hanna's opinion on this, because we're not political experts by any means. But we do have opinions, and Chris Hanna is the more moderate in our group. So I wanted to talk to him a little bit and talk to the audience a little bit and find out what people's opinions are on if Trump gets in or if he doesn't get in, and what his independent run would mean for us in society.
Well, first off, I mean, we don't really know that the political powers that be, the Republican perspective, is ever actually going to seriously consider Trump. Like, let's say Trump wins the banana republic vote, so to speak. Let's say he wins it. Let's say Trump is the top winner, the breadwinner for the Republican candidates for the Republican National Convention. Do you really think they're going to seriously consider him when they put him up against whoever the Democrats throw up? Because there's a very, very tough road for someone as I guess one-dimensional as Donald Trump, and he's so consistent with throwing out flamboyant and frankly disgusting remarks that I don't think that's any way he can be consistent enough to ever be taken seriously that to make it through an entire election cycle. I mean, I'm looking at an article from the USA or the U.S. News. Robert Schlesinger wrote, "A passing fancy for the GOP. Is Trump seriously considered a front runner?" And they don't. Essentially, the GOP doesn't consider him be an honest one. And on Politico, there's the recent thing from this week when Jeb Bush said Trump is not a serious candidate. I don't know if he has insider information, if he's been talking to the bigwigs, because if anybody has any kind of a short lease connection to the people running the Republican National Convention, it would be the brother of a two-term president, Jeb Bush. And if he's saying that they're not considering Trump as a serious candidate, he's more of a dog and pony show person to bring, I guess, some kind of liveliness, some kind of life to the as you said, the cadaver of the GOP. It really is. It reminds me of the movie Major League when the announcer is saying, and Cleveland is showing their first signs of life in weeks when they all start fist fighting each other. That's what the first few the first few Republican debates were like. And so it's kind of being narrowed down, it's kind of being reduced. And so we're seeing, the ridiculousness that is bubbling to the top when we have the idea that something can be crumped, the Cruz Trump ticket that is being essentially a nice way of saying that the United States is going to be fucked by the Republican.
But we gotta analyze something a second though. So yeah. You're right. I mean, Trump is a ridiculous figure. He is. I mean, he's not a figure. I don't understand why people want to vote for him. I don't understand the Ben Carson thing either. But I'll tell you what. I'm in Jenison. Fucking Ben Carson is all over Jenison. There's Carson signs, fucking bumper stickers. And I told this on the Not Another Atheist podcast that we were interviewed on last week, and you guys should go check that out because I spill my guts on ghost stories. But in all seriousness, my wife, she didn't believe me. She's like, no, nobody supports Carson. What are you talking about? And then it's because I pointed it out. She was driving down the road and she's like, holy shit, I saw a Ben Carson bumper sticker. I saw a sign in somebody's yard. She's like, people fucking take this shit seriously? People really are going to vote for this guy? And I was like, yes, that's what I've been trying to tell you.
I got into a big argument with my sister about it. And she put him out there when she first started hearing him talk and stuff. And so it's like, this guy's, he's an African-American in GOP. Like, it's kind of refreshing. And then I went through it, and I mean, it was just, it's the worst kind of apologetics. It was a surprising amount of apologetics. Like, we're talking, what is it when you lose your memory? This terminology, well, whatever it is, it's almost like he can't
dementia.
Remember, when you can't remember what that slavery. He said that civil rights, the African Americans have, their in the past was better than the current time. But slavery was better for that. It's just a level of like it's dementia almost. It was just I can't understand it. So I tried to point these things out. And I try to just show people, like, this is what he's really said. Like, this isn't us making fun of him. This isn't like the Donald Trump meme. I actually looked it up a little while ago where he said that if he ever ran as president, he would run as a Republican because those people will eat anything. They're stupid. Well, it's fake. It was made up. It was bullshit. The Carson stuff, there's videos of him saying it. It's not like we're making this up. He really does think that evolution is a tool of the devil to trick people. He really thinks that African Americans had it better in the past. Well, like Louis C.K. says, white people are really the only people who could ever have a good time traveling. You can't go into the past as an African American or as a Mexican. You're going to meet immediately a slave. It's that's what Carson is trying to negate. He's trying to say like everything was great. He is living in a level of apologetics that I'm uncomfortable with, and so I mean. He is considered a legitimate candidate in Jenison. I haven't seen any of his bumper stickers or anything, so that's a surprise to me. But I mean, Trump is getting the big ticket. He's getting the media, and I think that's just the media blowing itself up even more, as opposed to the people really supporting him as a serious candidate.
Yeah. And some of it is you look at that and you go, people, the media plays a role in this. The media plays a role in Donald Trump as well. And I get that. But you have to look at the political system. And I'm going to do a little foreshadowing because I seem to like foreshadowing, I guess. I don't know what that means sexually, and maybe Jen can help us out in a couple episodes. But when we look at it and we look at the aspects of it, we have a two-party system. What happens if you split the vote? Now, on the Democratic side, I could tell you exactly what happens or what will happen if Bernie doesn't get in. Even if he ran as an independent, I don't think that he would succeed, and I don't think a lot of people would divvy up that.
I think it would separate the Democratic Party and it would strengthen the Republican Party.
I disagree with you on that one because I personally would not vote for Bernie as an independent, even if my heart truly lied. And again,
that's something that I'm really fighting. I don't know what I would do because the Republican ticket scares me so much. I would love to be comfortable with voting third party. I would love for more people to be comfortable voting third party. But the pitfalls of voting for something that's essentially not going to win, and so you're conceding defeat to the conservatives on this end. It scares the shit out of me. One of the guys that we talk about we talk with all the time online, at least I personally do. He's in a lot of groups. His name is John. I'm not going to say his last name because he used to blog for my old blog with Atheist Analysis, and he never wanted his name fully out there. And so he says that he would accept voting for the third party and letting the Republican insanity in to teach the people, to show them how terrible it actually is. And what scares me is that when Republican House, Republican Senate, and Republican President are all in power, they would change enough if they could. Like if you could override the presidential veto, you can change enough policy to the point where the next election cycle, even if a Democratic president got in, it's erasing the damage is going to be really, really difficult. And that's kind of what scares me. I don't know if I could accept the potential of having that much of a regress if otherwise voting for like the lesser of two evils when I consider Hillary Clinton better than Republicans, but not by much.
But you have, I agree. But you have to look at the opposite side. They think the same thing about us. I mean,
know.
You do have to take the humanity of it, and you have to understand that people do come from a different point of view, and people do see things in a different light, and that they're going to see things differently than what we see things, and they are going to see the same thing for us. What if a completely Democratic Congress and Senate and president got in? It would take so long to reverse that, and we would disagree personally because we don't agree with their worldview or their philosophy. But we have to at least recognize that they would be scared by that, and that's going to motivate them to vote in certain ways. That's going to motivate them to, be in a different realm than they were before. And what that means is so if Trump gets the nomination, you're going to have a lot of people voting Trump because it's a party line. You're going to have people wanting to vote Trump. And what does that mean for the nation? Maybe there's more Democrats now than there are Republicans. I don't know. We'd have to look up the numbers. But what would that mean for the nation if that happened? If that physically happened for us? So if Trump did this, if Trump got the nomination and Republicans felt they had to vote for him, he could give whatever Democratic candidate a run for their money, and I guess it would depend on whether it was Bernie or Clinton. I mean, because Clinton will have a better chance, in my opinion, being a more neutral party than Bernie's going to be being that neutral party. He's not towing a neutral line. He is being very progressive, very liberal, very socialistic in some of his viewpoints. And I'm not saying I disagree with him or disagree with him doing that. I'm just saying is that if he got the nomination, you put him and Trump together, you're going to have this big, huge blow up. It's almost better if Trump gets the nomination to put Hillary in there because it would be easier. But on the opposite side, you have to look at the opposite side of that. Think about this. If Hillary gets that nomination, as much shit as she's gotten from the Republican Party, and I don't agree with the amount of shit that she's gotten, I 100% disagree with almost every aspect of the shit that they've given her.
Yeah, their critiques have been very superficial. They have not been very grounded in factual analysis. They've run around with the email analysis and with Benghazi, and after years of all of these email gates and Benghazi gates and all the stupid gates, and I wish I would stop saying gate
Gate.
But-
We'll call it Chris Gate.
Yes,
It's Chris Gate on this show,
It's
bitches.
Janet Gate. Well, I mean, if they would just move on and deal with the things that she said, deal with the actual policy that she supported, deal with her switching and flipping in certain cases. It's a great case where Elizabeth Warren talks about Hillary switching when she became a actual politician versus when she was just the first lady supporting Bill. I mean, these kinds of things are real data points that they could deal with, but they don't. They want to go with the slander. They want to go with the libel, and they attack her character versus they attack her politics, and then that makes it easier for her to win something like that. I definitely think that the Trump and Sanders polarization is Trump is dealing with like this really deep seated racism that we're seeing. That when someone's out there that is openly saying it, everybody's like, yes, 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 yes. And we're seeing this really unnerving core of people in the United States, this conservative core that really does have this kind of gravitation towards this xenophobia. And it's sickening, but it's not completely surprising. But it's just now that we're completely seeing it out in the open, it's a bit unnerving. And with Bernie Sanders, it's the exact opposite. We're seeing a little bit less of that moderate nature or the self-beneficial type of things that, like, because let's face it, Hillary Clinton really does seem like she's in this to benefit herself as opposed to Bernie, who seems like he's in it to create.
I would disagree with that a little bit. I'm sorry.
Just with her past economic things with the Walmart stuff. I mean, she's really a business person. She's a business person first and foremost, and I see her politics as the same kind of thing. Like, I see Bernie much less wealthy and stuff, and so I would see he would be more the opposite of the bigotry and less Republican, towing the Republican line. The Bernie is the less moderate and the less capitalistic, and he is really towing what the old Democratic, not so much the old one because we talked about that on the last episode, but he would be, I guess, more party line what it would have been the last 10, 15, 20 years of what Democrats used to be, as opposed to what they've been turning into now.
So I guess tell us, do you how about this? Do you think, and you could be honest, because I don't agree with a little bit of your Hillary analysis right there, but do you think that if Trump doesn't get it and he runs independent, that's pretty much going to give us a shoe-in as a Democratic Party, whether we have Bernie or Clinton? I mean, in reality, I will be happy with either one of them compared to a Republican.
Yeah. No,
I would not. The closest Republican I could vote for would be that Kashish guy, that John Kashish guy or whatever the hell his name is. He's the closest I can vote for.
He's the most moderate of the group. But definitely,
and I'm pretty anti his fucking.
That's a personal battle.
Planned Parenthood stance.
It's a personal battle I've been having. I am not sure if I would stick to the party line with the Democratic nomination if it's Hillary, depending on what candidate Hillary is running against versus voting for Sanders in an independent run. If he does not win the party election, I against Trump, I think I would vote party line because he is such a polarizing and ridiculous character that if he ever was in charge of anything more than a terrible real estate business, I really would feel uncomfortable for the future of not just the American people, but for the human race. The guy would be the commander-in-chief of the executive branch of the largest military in the fucking world, man. He would have the buttons. He would have the absolute buttons and the final say in some of that stuff. I mean, the House and the Senate have to approve military and warlike actions, but let's face it, they're going to approve a lot of the things that xenophobic and paranoid, possibly schizophrenic Donald Trump have to say about the rest of the world and the actions and the best course of action that we should take. It's just, those are the things that I have to weigh in. I would love a Sanders O'Malley battle to see how they would do. And I mean, I would say O'Malley is, I don't know, he's a nice third party wheel. I don't know what he would do against Hillary, but yeah, I don't know what I would do between Hillary, Bernie, and if Trump was in a category of number one for Republicans.
Yeah. Well, as we close up, we can't spend any more time on Trump. I can't give the guy any more fucking airtime than I've already fucking given him. And as we leave the segment and we're listening to Manson's basically scream, just scream into the fucking microphone about the death song, right? The death song, because if Trump gets in, that's what the fuck it'll be. And I'm not worried. I have faith in humanity. I have hope. I have belief that we're not going to go down this trail, that we're not going to have a Trump president. But at the same point, I understand that if we do, Chris, we may be in, not just for a little bit of anarchy. We may be in for a full-blown fucking revolution. Make sure you stay tuned to more Cellar Door Skeptics, because when we come back, we got our friend Justin Hale, and we're going to have a conversation about libertarianism, and if it fits in with Donald Trump's personality. Maybe Justin's Donald Trump's right-hand man. We'll be right back, everyone, with more Cellar Door fucking Skeptics.
Hey guys, this is Wyatt Mathers from the Atheist Avengers podcast. You are listening to the Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution.
Like what you're hearing? Check out more Cellar Door Skeptics every week right here on Spreaker and iTunes. Make sure you come back and check out new episodes with your hosts, Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna. And always, remember, prepare for the revolution.
To the show.
Thoughts are free. Libertarianism is a broad collection of political policies possessing the common themes of limited government and strong individual liberty. Welcome back to more Cellar Door Skeptics. Tonight we have an awesome segment where we get to bring a friend of ours, somebody local, a volunteer for the CFI. They sit on the board. A young man named Justin Hale joins us to talk about libertarianism. And because I've called myself a socialistic libertarian before, and we're going to talk a little bit about that in a few minutes, but the big point tonight is to kind of drive home what is libertarianism and let the audience decide whether they fit within the confines or the non-confines of what defines libertarianism. So please welcome to the program my dear friend, Mr. Justin Hale. How are you tonight, sir?
Fine. Thanks for having me on today.
Yeah, well, thank you so much for joining us. It's always a pleasure. And we will say that you made some comments on my Facebook page, some libertarian comments, and you said, hey, this would be a great discussion. And I said, hey, well, if we're going to fucking have a discussion, there's our explicit tag, if we haven't hit that already. But let's have a discussion on the show, because that's probably the most important thing, because you and I agree on a lot of things. I mean, and we run the same, secular circle here in Grand Rapids, Michigan, but there are some points to libertarianism I don't know if I 100% agree with. So Justin was kind. He put together this big outline and was like, hey, guys, I got something that I want to have a conversation with you about. And I had to bring Chris Hanna in because, he's the resident moderate of the group. I mean, he's not really a liberal. He's not really a Democrat. He kind of gets on his knees for Bernie Sanders, but he wants to, claim to be small business owners. So we thought we'd have a great conversation about libertarianism tonight. So Justin, I think the best place to start with this whole show and the whole conversation is to kind of define libertarianism, and let's go over some of the key points, some of the core values of libertarianism. So I'm going to let you go ahead and I'm going to let you kick the segment off and give us a little bit of what your thoughts on libertarianism is.
Well, thank you. First of all, the core of libertarianism is the non-aggression principle. Non is a big part of this. It's a negative philosophy at its core. A lot of the listeners will all be familiar with secularism or atheism. And secularism and atheism, they're negative philosophies as well. It's not about what you should do, it's about what shouldn't be done or what shouldn't be believed. And with libertarianism, the non-aggression principle is that you don't initiate the use of force on others. So violence is fine. Violence is definitely on the table. It's just don't start to attack someone else. That's the whole idea. Everything else is based upon that. The idea of negative rights, the idea of property rights, the way we measure, the way libertarians measure any sort of involvement in the economy, the way we view society. Everything's viewed through this lens. So that's the core of it. So the non-aggression principle, we use negative rights to distinguish our stance on things. We're not about positive rights. Positive rights, not in the sense that positive as pleasant, although a lot of people think of libertarians definitely as negative people. But
you're a pretty positive person.
Well, thank you. I heard when you said libertarian comments, I thought that was a euphemism for something else. But
well, this is a little bit before. I think Tanner has recently found his position, because I never really heard him talk about the socialist libertarian perspective. So this is kind of a new title that he's had for a relatively short period of time, because we've gone back and forth with our friends at Paleo Radio about their libertarian perspectives and more leaning towards the conservative side. And so he kind of found his niche. We did some tests and stuff online. We talked about it on a friend of ours show, Not Another Atheist podcast, and we kind of figured out where we all were. And his perspective, like once he took that test, he kind of figured out what the label he had. So he started taking libertarianism a little more seriously, I guess. We had some off the cuff quips in here, things about that. This is a really cool idea, just to kind of get into it a little bit deeper. And I think that's why he's a little more interested in it now.
So was it the political compass test?
Yes.
I believe.
Yep.
Okay. And another great place to get those sorts of tests, and also things related to personality, as they're often correlated. There's yourmorals.org by Jonathan Haidt. He meticulously studies humanity.
I saw your link in the little notebook here. We've got the book coming through.
All right. Well, libertarians and atheists have a lot in common. One thing that they have in common is that you ask 10 libertarians about their opinion on libertarianism, and you'll often find that they have 11 different opinions on the matter. And the same thing goes with atheists a lot of times. When you ask them questions like, what should atheists be concerned with? What should be included under atheism, positive atheism, negative atheism? People get upset over agnosticism a lot of times. Say, oh, well, I'm an agnostic, I'm not an atheist. Well,
Well, and the funny thing is in one of the articles that you linked, it says one of the best definitions for libertarianism is the two words called negative liberty or freedom from. And that's kind of, if you think about a lot of atheists, I don't personally associate with this term in atheism, but a lot of atheists say, well, it's a non-belief. It's something I don't believe in. I don't buy that personally. I believe atheism is a belief. And I'll say it now, and you guys can all crucify me, and we can have another fucking debate about this. But atheism is a belief set. It's not a core defining definitional set. It really only defines what we don't believe in per se, but it's still a sort of a belief. But the article that you linked, the one that you put in here that talks about negative liberty, and it has this example in there. It says Jack's living in New York. He'd like to go to California to visit his family. He wants to, travel down there. But what if Jack is sick and he's not physically able to travel? Well, in these instances, no one's preventing him from going to California, so his negative liberty remains intact. Yet he lacks the capacity to fulfill his desire. So from a positive liberty standpoint, he is unfree. And I think that's a point that a lot of people miss, because, and I'm going to ask you in a second, and I hope you'll be able to shed some light on this. So in that situation, how does libertarianism and the laws inside of that you would create to help Jack, would a libertarian come out and say, okay, well, he's too sick to be able to go, he's not able to do that, he's been diagnosed, it's not like he's just faking it, right? He's actually physically unable to go, let's say because he lost his leg in a war. In libertarianism, is there a capacity to help him fulfill his desire to get to California?
All right, you're getting right to the heart of it right here, and this is how we end up sounding like evil monsters. Because libertarianism doesn't say that we should do anything; it just says what we shouldn't do. And you could call that a stance on things, a policy position, a belief system, value system, whatever you want. But the idea is to allow the maximum amount of compatibility with others' liberty, because the positive liberty, if we mandated that without some sort of voluntary agreement, would necessarily conflict with other people's rights. That creates conflict there. So
hold on, I'm going to stop you real quick, though, because I'm going to interrupt you because I got a lot of questions. Because maybe I have to redefine myself now. Maybe you're going to make me rethink this. But so if it affects other people's liberties, if there's not a stance that's being taken inside of libertarianism to help Jack, right? Isn't that kind of a violation of his ability to succeed? Isn't that a violation of him being able to live the freest life that he wants to live?
Yeah, if he's not fulfilled, if in a libertarian society, then everyone decided, you know what, I'm libertarian and I'm going to be a jerk to this guy, then yeah, his positive rights are not fulfilled. He's left incapable. So that's possible.
So wouldn't that dignify the reason why we would need some sort of laws or stipulations or means to help him?
You would think that, but there's some problems with the positive rights philosophy.
Well, hold on though. We still haven't gotten through the negative rights side right yet. We haven't been able to go and define and say, okay, well, no, hold on. So you just admitted that, right? It's a violation of his rights, his liberty. If he's not happy, if everybody's an evil. His positive right. If everybody's evil, right, and they don't want to help him, they're like, "Oh, fuck you, no offense, dude. You're going to be a drain on me, and therefore, I don't think your cause is worthy, and I'm not going to help send you to California." In that instance, right? In that instance, everybody's against him. So you could stack the deck if everybody was against that, and then you would have to rely on a social change to get people's, if you want to call them, hearts or minds to open up the change to Jack's situation.
Yeah, absolutely. You're relying on culture. You're relying on people's voluntary actions. You're relying on charity, that sort of thing. And we fully admit that that's a hard thing to get past. The libertarian community generally rejects the idea that that there is a better alternative than the free association of individuals.
So the charitable aspect for like community, as opposed to creating some kind of law system or creating some kind of rule system, it's just the altruistic nature of humanity and social contracts and things like that. That would be what would potentially help, as opposed to creating a system of like regulation to say that Jack deserves this. It's more like this is the benefit of humanity as what our innate moralities and stuff like that. That's what's going to help Jack. If anybody wants to come out of the woodworks and help Jack, that's what's going to happen, as opposed to someone saying someone should help Jack because he needs help, like through the governmental system, through a centralized authority or something like that. Like it's just be the society or the social networks that do these kinds of things.
You hit the nail on the head right there. And there's reasons why we believe this. I like to come back to evolution time and time again. It's the same sort of thing where you have some aspects of this process that are deterministic, but you can't come up with the exact details. So when I first talk about libertarianism, many people are rightly skeptical. They're saying, okay, well, you're not mandating that Jack's going to be okay. So it sounds pretty sketchy to me, this idea that you have that things are just going to fall into place somehow, that society is not going to leave him cold and hungry. Well, we have other examples of natural processes where spontaneous order naturally emerges. Language is one example. There's no central command, but it develops in a way that seems to fit the needs of the people that use it. So it's not just an instance where it spontaneously evolved and then there's also a victim involved. It's not an instance where there's an exploiter class that developed through the development of English. So
it's almost like a meritocracy. We're looking at I like to say that morality is an evolutionary trait, like geese know how to fly south. Like these kinds of innate things are actually passed on through social and through genetic markers and things like that. So like that's kind of what you're leaning on. You're leaning on that social evolutionary morality and assistance as
Absolutely.
opposed to the regulatory rule setting.
Look at slavery. That was a horrible institution that was in violation of people's negative rights. With the exception of America, the world decided that it could, with very little strife, end slavery. And people decided to end this, in my opinion, and a lot of libertarians' opinions, because it's not economical. It just was weeded out because it's a horrible idea.
But what if it was economical? Would that make it right? I mean, I guess, and maybe this is why I'm more of a socialist than a libertarian, because I would say I don't really care what's economical or what's viable for the world. I'm going to say, hey, what is moral for the world? And
so you're a means, not an ends kind of guy.
Yeah, and to me, you're gonna. To me, just that statement right there would be almost an instant turnoff to libertarianism, because the way I see slavery is it was a moral wrong, and I think that the problem I have with it is the fact that I don't think people were evolved enough for a while to understand what it was. I think people were less intelligent, had the less capability of actually understanding it, and the minority people that did understand that it was wrong, the ones that did fight against it, that wanted to argue with it, it took a while for their stance to happen, and then eventually, I guess kind of like a virus, it spread, and people finally started to say, okay, hold on, slavery is wrong, and we need to do something about it.
Slavery is definitely wrong. Slavery is explicitly wrong. It's under libertarianism, it's a violation of the non-aggression principle all the way. You can't get much worse than that.
Why should we wait for social reform to fix that? Why wouldn't we want revolution? Why wouldn't we want the argument? Why wouldn't we want some sort of a war per se to happen to take this out?
Well, to speed it up, maybe.
Well, if we could do it without war, wouldn't that be better?
If you could, but you couldn't. You obviously couldn't do it without war.
Well, the rest of the world did it besides America.
I don't think they did it without war. We could fact check that. I would disagree with you on the fact that I don't think no other nation didn't go to war over slavery. I don't agree with that. That doesn't sound logical to me.
Well, check it out. We can look at England for starters and use that as an idea. I remember hearing that in England, the slave owners they were paid off, and there were various other mechanisms used to try to get people through a transition period. One of the things we have to remember is that slavery, at least in America, was maintained by putting the costs of maintaining slavery onto the average population. The costs were socialized. So we have the slave owners charging the average citizen with hunting down the escaped slaves and maintaining court systems just for the slave owners.
I'm going to 100% disagree with the terminology you use there. You're using socialist like they're using it as this is what it was meant to be. It's not a socialist thing that they did to hunt down slaves. What they did is they used tax laws and loopholes, and they used government power, which is not a socialist thing, and they used that to attack the people and to say, hey, you know what? My livelihood is better. It's big corporation at its best. It's capitalism at its worst. It's to me, what you're saying is that they use socialism incorrectly. They didn't use it the way they meant to do. They took the loopholes and then they tried to fuck people. It sounds more like authoritarian communism to me.
The thing that I want to point out is that capitalism is a system where you have ownership all the way. It's not partial ownership. So if you do something, if you fuck up, then that's on you. That people aren't expected to pick up the pieces for you in capitalism. There's other systems where people are expected to pick up for the mistakes of individuals, whether, like fascism. Fascism was an instance of where you have these corporations and where the taxpayers are expected to pitch in to help reward the good companies, and nepotism. We have communism. The bureaucrats did very well under this system at the expense of everyone else. The costs were distributed amongst the rest of the population. If we don't like the word socialized cost, I'm not against socialism per se. And here's another thing. Sounds really strange. Libertarianism exactly against socialism per se. It's just the mandate that if you have a situation where someone needs or wants to maintain to fulfill their positive rights, that it's mandated whether or not there's an agreement that unwilling participants give into the system.
It's almost like social, or it's almost like libertarianism is pie in the sky. It's the hopeful side of things. It's almost the opposite of negativity per se. It's like they hope everybody's just going to contribute. They hope everybody's going to go, hey, Jack, and I'm going to bring this back to this Jack guy, right, that we're talking about, who's missing a leg, who wants to go to California to visit his kids or his ex-wife or maybe his mother as she's dying of cancer. So libertarianism, to me, is the hope that people are going to do good and help Jack out, and that they're going to help people through things, whereas socialism is saying we recognize the fact that we're humans, we recognize the fact that there's faults and there's issues, and that we're going to change and correct those different issues. And sometimes, you're right, it takes a little bit of force, it takes a little bit of violation of rights, but in the end, at some point, we have to violate rights because you can't have a completely free society. And it goes back to the free will argument, which I don't want to get into 100%, but to a point it goes to the free will argument, in the sense that, in a sense, we're only so free. We can never be 100% free. It's just it's like an absolute that just can never fucking exist.
Well, absolutes aside, I think this is going to the point about evolution. When you talk to a creationist, they'll say something like, this whole idea of evolution that you have, that seems so implausible to me. How could this possibly happen? The idea that, just randomly things, well, it's not exactly random. There's random changes, but there's natural selection that's going on here. And you can't predict everything about it, but some things are kind of predictable. You don't know how the genes are going to evolve. You don't know the color of the fox's left ear, the fifth generation after you select for certain traits. But you do know if you go, for instance, and you look at some foxes and you only feed the foxes that are friendly, you're setting in motion a cascading series of events that will lead to the preference for friendlier foxes. You're going to have more friendly foxes, all else being equal. Now, it could be something else could happen too. That's why we have that ceteris paribus. All else being equal, this is what's going to happen. It's the same thing with these market forces that naturally, and not just charity. We're not just relying on charity. But yeah, I guess, you could say that this is naive, but, maybe evolution is the same way then, where we just say, yeah, somehow, I don't know how, we're going to come up with something like the internet, and it's going to make everything wonderful for humanity if we let it. And that sounds ridiculous, but remember that, society is full of all sorts of examples like that. In the last, 100 years or so, never before has humanity experienced such a drop in poverty. Never before has humanity experienced such an improvement in well-being overall and lifespan, that sort of thing, and equality. So these are all unprecedented things that we need to reflect on, and maybe it should give us pause, and maybe we should consider the possibility that this really is starting to take off, that liberty is this kind of positive selection force, that it's helping humanity.
Yeah, I guess, and that's the thing is, I don't see that, though. I don't see libertarianism being the sole driver of this. I don't see libertarianism as being the thing that is going to push us into the next century. In one of the articles, again, that you presented as something that represents libertarianism, a lot of it talks about how if we act on positive liberty, we're in for, or act on negative liberty, if we try to help move that through, we violate somebody else's liberty. And that's the biggest thing. And so then, some of me almost says is that, well, that means we should never take loans. We should only live within our means 100%. So that means if you make $10 an hour, you live within your $10 an hour means. Even if that means you never get to ever enjoy anything, you never get to get ahead in life, you never get to have the one-up. And that means if all the white people decide that, hey, Asian Americans are no longer going to do this. We're going to violate this and say, hey, you know what? This is going to be our revolutionary ring up on the chain of events. And that, in 200 years, yeah, it'll backfire. It'll screw us in a couple hundred years. In a couple hundred years, we can't. That's exactly what'll happen. Is it'll fuck us. That's how evolution works. At some point, it recorrects itself, but it doesn't do it right away. So we could be selfish, especially if we're skeptical or secular or atheist, and we don't believe in afterlife. So I got 80 years on this earth. I'm going to take advantage of this. To me, libertarianism, expands and exfoliates and allows people to take advantage of some of these things. It allows people to use this. It allows people to say, because I don't want to violate your personal liberties and I don't want mine violated, therefore I'm not going to help you. So you're just going to be stuck in the lot you're cast in. And it almost feels like a fucking caste system to me. And it doesn't seem like the evolution allows for it to recreate itself, to evolve to the point where it gives people the chance to move past where they're at. Whereas socialism tries to help equal out that balance. And is it perfect? No. No fucking way is it perfect. We can tell you for a fact it's not perfect. But we could tell you on the opposite side, if it gives people the higher probability of having a chance, to me statistically, socialism wins out every single fucking time. And on that note, we're going to pause real quick and take a quick commercial break. When we come back, we'll have more from Justin. And yes, I'll let Justin answer the question in my challenge on socialism. So when we come back, we'll have more Cellar Door Skeptics. Stay tuned, because we'll be right back, everybody.
This is Trav Mamone, host of the By Any Means podcast, and you're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics. Prepare for the revolution. We have cookies.
If you guys like what you're hearing on Cellar Door Skeptics, please consider sponsoring us on our Patreon page. Our goal at Cellar Door Skeptics is to help promote more science, skepticism, secularism, and humanism in the world. We want to create better content for our podcast and for you, the listener, all while trying to help promote local activism. We're going to strive to make better podcasts, and I'll tell you what, we're even going to contribute some of the proceeds to charity. So please join us over at Patreon.com/Cellar Door Skeptics to make sure that you sponsor us for as little as $1 an episode. Thank you guys so much, and prepare for the revolution.
Now, back to the show.
Welcome back to Cellar Door Skeptics. We're going to continue our conversation with Justin, and just before the break, I was going on about how socialism seems to be a lot much better than libertarianism. But without further ado, I'll go ahead and I'll let Justin answer that question. Justin, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'll tell you, if I agreed with you on the facts of the matter, that more socialistic nations, in the sense of using force to try to even things out at some level, let's say, trying to take care of healthcare, that sort of thing, education. If we looked at the numbers, and the more government intervention, the more government regulation, the more prosperity happened, then I would abandon this. I use it as a default stance, and a lot of other libertarians too, like Milton Friedman. He's another example like this, where he says, I'm just starting out with this position that we need to live under the presumption of liberty. If we don't do that, then it's too easy to go into tyranny. But if there's a really good case, if there really is this situation, then yeah, you've got me then. But and I'll even go further. I'll say there are situations where, in fact, every single time we make one of these economic decisions, there's going to be winners and losers. Every single time libertarianism wins out over some other policy, I can guarantee you someone really will be hurt. There really will be those situations. The reason why I advocate for libertarianism is not for all the harm that it causes, is because I think realistically, of the choices we have, this is the least horrible option. And I look at the numbers. I look at the Gini coefficient, for instance, measure of inequality, and the numbers are best in the freest nations according to measures. For instance, heritage.org, they put together their numbers, and they measure things like corruption, whether or not you have free trade, whether or not you have laws against minimum wage, that sort of thing. We find these counterintuitive effects. For instance, nations that are freer tend to have less child labor. So at first glance, we would think, well, the system that you're promoting would allow child labor, and it does. I'm promoting the ability to use child labor. And when you take a sound bit like that,
we will clip that, just so you know.
I know.
Yeah,
that happens all the time. You can't avoid it.
He'll clip anything and everything, and he will hold on to it until he needs to use it. And then he'll send you an email saying, I need you to do something. Otherwise, this goes public.
No. I'm not a communist. That's not how it works. The authoritarian,
that's
I'm
blackmail. That's not quite communist. That would be more Stalinism or a little bit of old school Lenin. I mean, you could say that you're going to be pulling the KGB out on us, but
well, no offense to Hitler.
No offense. Yeah, we had that episode already. The only thing that I would say that the idea that like authoritarian type things, it's where a lot of people have this socialist idea that it becomes authoritarian, using force to reduce the liberties for people. It seems like that is like a natural tendency that you expect. The governments that are stronger, you expect them to become naturally more authoritarian over time. It's like they start off with a good idea, and then just this human immorality eventually breaks the system and makes it so that people will take advantage of whatever socialistic networks have been created. So they may have been started with good intentions, and then over time people kind of pervert those for their own potential gain. So like societies and countries that start off with a really good idea, and there's less liberty, as you would say, because they have socialistic tendencies, but through human immorality, things where they try to take advantage of stuff, we're losing that individual freedom. I don't take that quite pessimistic of a view. I guess is what my understanding is that like the places that are less liberty, or where the people have less liberty, I would think that directly does not directly correlate to having a negative. So like you've given up some of your freedoms to have the more socialistic tendencies. I don't see that as automatically becoming like what you were saying with there's more tendencies for child labor. There's more tendencies for the economic sanctions and economic control by the government. So less free capitalism, stuff like that. Like I like to think that there's a couple of different levels of that. As far as like the ones that are more socialistic countries, you have less freedoms, but there are benefits to that, as opposed to just having kind of like an authoritarian. The government has control of these, and there's just nothing you can do about it, and they're not working for your better advantage. Like that kind of social contract where you're giving up some of your freedoms, but you're reaping some rewards from that. It does happen in some countries, and so like I don't know if it's an evolutionary standpoint where it's not a big enough group that's not translating to the modern standard, the mean, as we get further along in our evolution or in human evolution. Because when we think of human evolution, it's such a short time period. Just in our own timelines, it's such a short time for social evolution to change, because we do everything so fast nowadays. So I think we're expecting things to change and to become better quicker than they really can. And so with like the socialistic tendencies, I really think that we can give a little bit more to them, and not expect them to become as authoritarian. I guess it's what it seems like you're insinuating they're going to be, no matter what we do, if you give up those freedoms.
There is that argument, but let's just grant for a minute that we're dealing with completely benevolent rulers, completely benevolent.
So they really have the
bureaucrats.
people's interest at heart.
Yeah, let's just take that for granted. We still got some problems here, even without looking at the evidence here. Some, I think it's called a priori reasons for being skeptical of this kind of thinking. We have the socialist calculation problem, for instance. Let's say, for instance, I wanted to trade with you. I wanted something you have. You have some really good Jaeger.
Really good beer.
You have really good beer. Okay. You have really good beer, and let's say you wanted something from me. Maybe you wanted I wanted
your awesome cell phone.
My okay, now it's really a fantasy. All right. But if we engage in this voluntarily, we know something based on the meaning of the words that we're using here. If it's voluntary and we both engage in this, I feel like I'm better off and you feel like you're better off. If we both do that, if we both go through with the exchange. Now, if we're both, or one of us is forced into this, we can't say that for certain. It might be true. But if I held you up at gunpoint and said, give me the beer, and you gave me the beer, and I gave you a cell phone, you can't say that. Now, this is a problem, because now we have a hard time judging value of things. I'll give you another piece of this little puzzle here. This is a real rough overview of the socialist calculation problem. No human being on Earth can make or knows how to make a number 2 pencil. Not one human being. Now, there's lots of human beings on Earth that contribute to make a number 2 pencil, but not one human being can do it. You have to cut down trees. You have to know how to cut down trees. I mean, from materials, from trees, from mining, all that sort of thing. And even if you had the equipment, no one human being would be able to put together all the knowledge necessary to make a number 2 pencil. It's remarkable, but it's true. I mean, you won't meet anyone who can do this. There's people who've tried similar things. For instance, recently a man tried to make a sandwich out of just growing it himself. And what he ended up doing is making a sandwich that was meh, in his opinion, and it ended up costing him thousands of dollars. All right, well, that's what happens when you forego specialization and trade. And you have to forego specialization and trade if you're not allowed to make comparisons. You lose this information to some extent when you force one person to be in charge of pencil making, so to speak. When you force this one person to be in charge of the economy, to even in a small aspect of it, you're losing this vital bit of information about how much material do we need? What type of material should I use? Should I substitute wood for aluminum? All these kind of little decisions that people are making voluntarily. If you have to make that for someone else, if you can't rely on these voluntary transactions to figure out through prices what the actual value of those things are, there's no way for you to assess it. And then we do have this situation that's so ridiculous that ended up, an obvious problem in communist USSR and communist China, for instance, where there was a huge degree of government control, where they were mandating things, and they would do ridiculous things like, well, we mandate that you produce a ton of screws. Well, they would just make really big screws then. And the people don't need really big screws, but they didn't know that. They didn't know what type of material to use. So these are the kind of problems that happen. So this is why the libertarians like to flip, and we like to say, well, socialism is a nice idea, but really we need freedom to know anything about the economy, to make rational decisions. We need to be able to assess what people actually want and allow them to figure this out. This economy is a trillion-piece jigsaw puzzle, and putting one person of charge in that is bound to fail.
Yeah, so that's why the blend is the thing that I really like. I've always said this, and Chris says I'm on my knees for Bernie Sanders. He's a pretty blended type of situation on that thing. I mean, he's definitely not as socialistic as what you would say with China and Russia, but he understands the necessity for having some kind of oversight to watch the unregulated situation, because we've seen what the unregulated situation does. It works in its own benefit on a regular basis because of humanity. Like I like the idea of libertarianism to its perspective and its core meaning, but it's kind of like the idea of Marxism is the first attempt to make a scientifically accurate socialistic thing, to try to break it down so that it's actual in some kind of a psychological manner. And then the like having the blend of the differences between the benefits in economic situations and stuff like that, like having some oversight and as much libertarian freedoms as you can possibly get, just getting that mix and trying to find that happy medium. Because in the end, I don't think because humans are naturally immoral, or not so much immoral, but we're not perfect, that the libertarian perspective is never fully attainable. Just like the perfect social society is never fully attainable. I just don't think that we can ever have a completely free or completely controlled society where it's good for everyone. It's got to be a mixture in between.
Which is why I'm a socialistic libertarian.
Yeah, and that's I mean, we're not that far from that the political perspective test that we took. I mean, I'm a little bit more in the middle, as we would expect, but I mean, I really think it's got to be a mixture in between. And so, like, understanding the libertarian perspective is really important. Understanding the socialistic and kind of finding your mixture in between is the only way to keep everyone happy.
I wanted to push back a little bit on that, if I may. The whole idea of regulations benefiting society, for instance. We can look at some of the data. I think I have this here from the Mercatus, reddata.mercatus.org, right at the bottom there. And that what that shows is that regulations have been increasing any way you cut it, in the amount of spending, in the amount of lines of regulation, the code, the lines of law that are written, and we're not getting the results that anyone would want, really. Aside, there's some rich people that are benefiting right now as the share of income that's going into the government, that's flowing in from the 1%, has steadily decreased now with the increase in regulations. The increase in regulations don't seem to be preventing us from having sort of financial collapses either. So
you're arguing that regulation has increased even with things like
Yes.
Citizens United?
I'll give you an example.
Decreases.
This is one. Here's the more controversial one. No, let me go to the least controversial one. This is kind of like climate change in the libertarian community. When other people say that it's not happening, we're like, look, guys, you just got to accept the facts. Free trade. Free trade is a classic example there. There's all sorts of things that are tacked on with free trade that aren't free trade, but free trade in and of itself is something that's almost universally agreed upon by economists, the people that look into this matter, to be good for everyone except for a few special interest groups. Unless you're a steel company that's being protected by these tariffs, tariffs are awful. They're killing people. They're making people so poor that it's stopping human progress. We're denying people incredible benefits. There's mathematical reasons why this is true. There's the Ricardian law of comparative advantage. If you make, if it takes you 3 minutes to make a widget, and it takes you, 4 minutes to make, a chair, but it takes me, and I'm worse at everything. It takes me longer to do everything that you can do. If we don't specialize in trade, we're worse off, both of us, than if we specialize in trade. So if you just run simple math in these sorts of scenarios, it takes you 3 and 4 minutes to do something, and then it takes me 6 and 5. We're still going to win in absolute terms. Even.
So your basic argument is that removing the regulations that benefit certain people, but also removing the regulations that restrict other people, like taking all of it away, it's basically gonna offset all of the
you have market regulations.
So you're removing all market regulations so that it's just completely and totally open, so that, like what you were saying, it's like we have groups that take advantage of the political process through lobbying and through all that kind of stuff. So they gain unfair advantage over the rest of the market, and they gain on that. So in removing their ability to gain unfair advantage, we're also going to be helping because we're placing restrictions on like the really big ones as well. We're going to remove those restrictions. So it really is, it's the state of nature that will correct itself, kind of what you're looking for the economic market.
That's something like what I'm describing. Yeah.
But that doesn't happen. We know that doesn't happen. Come on, why? We talked about this last episode, Chris. This is exactly what we talked about last episode, is that the Republicans, who were the more democratic aspect, they set up all these big corporate payouts, and they set up all these taxations, and they set everything up the way they wanted it to, and then they went to little government, and that's ridiculous. And so the market doesn't regulate itself that way once you hit this large of an economic economy that we have here. It doesn't do that. We don't see that. So
I just think it's keeping that really ideological one, or like the perfect one. It's like, oh, well, this, if we keep all of the bias out, then it'll work. But like I said, I don't think we can. I don't think we can keep that utopian market system.
Look. if Chris, if to make a widget, it takes you 4 minutes and it takes Justin 6 minutes to make a widget, you're probably more defined to make that widget than he is, right? But if you're the only one, let's say you're 1 in 100 that can make that widget, does that mean you get to charge 10 times the price that it would cost if Justin makes that widget? Is it going to take more Justins to make the same amount of widgets as you do? It's going to take more, right? But if he could sell them less, that'll try and balance the market out. Well, it doesn't work like that. If you're the better widget maker, and in reality, we can look at we can take cell phones for fuck's sake. I mean, we can look at what are you looking at? You're looking at a fucking Apple computer, right? You're looking at an Apple iPhone. I have more Apple products in this fucking house. Well, do they deserve the multi-billion dollars that they get from this industry? They charge more for this phone than Samsung does for 3 phones. Does that mean it's right? Does that mean that capitalism is working? It didn't inspire it. It inspires other people to go try and make better phones, but it doesn't mean it fucking happens.
So it's tough also that we have we're not like one giant global society yet. I think it'll be a little easier to kind of figure this stuff out when we don't have the nationalistic tendencies. We don't have all of the borderlines where we're battling against this culture, this norm, this standard. Because like you said, Apple makes billions and millions of dollars. Well, they take their money and they put it in different places, and they get advantages that I'm a small business entrepreneur. I pay my taxes because I have no other option. I don't have a lawyer that can help me find loopholes. I can't do those things that these mega companies can do. They find the little regulation errors and the stuff like that. And so, like, avoiding those regulatory things, avoiding the government keeping an eye on how you pay your taxes or something like that, like you're maximizing the individual freedom for these people. So with the libertarian perspective, like what would you do about like the taxation things where people put their money off in the Cayman Islands so they don't have to pay their share of, taxation, stuff like that? I mean, is that going to be a positive effect on somebody's rights to just do what they want for their business? Because I mean, that's a negative thing for the small guy and for the country itself. So I guess expanding past the nationalistic tendencies, like taking those freedoms and rights and stuff like that, would it be within someone's rights or mega corporations' rights to take their money and put it off so they don't have to pay taxes? Or is that something we still need to keep going for?
All right, I got to tell you about the two kinds of libertarians. You're asking a tricky question.
Yeah,
there's
like I said, I'm the layperson here. I'm looking to learn.
And we do got to wrap this up soon, guys. We can't go over 40 minutes.
I'll just say real quick. The nations that have the most liberty do have the most equality and do have the best results. Now, whether or not it's political reality in a large nation, I'll leave that for someone else to decide. But when there is liberty, there is prosperity. And that's true of economic liberty. If you take away the minimum wage, if you take away all these regulations that seem to be safety nets, somehow people tend to be better with time. Now, the issue of whether or not you can tax people, well, if you're an anarchist, for an anarchist libertarian, for the more confident libertarian, then no, they don't want any sort of taxation. But most of the libertarians are more like classical liberals. The classical liberals felt that government had a role in doing one thing, and one thing only, and that is protecting other people's negative rights. So you have the court systems and you have the military, and that's it. So you just make sure that people are paying taxes to the minimum necessary with as much liberty as possible for these people. But yeah, this is the one concession that so many libertarians make, is that we're going to have taxes to maintain our army and courts. So yeah, they would go after people in the Cayman Islands. They would certainly have some sort of, most libertarians would have some sort of structure for nailing these people under that grounds. Hey, let me add something here if I can. I notice a lot of similarities, and a lot of libertarians also notice a lot of similarities with atheism, the kind of arguments that we get. The whole evolution thing I brought up before, there's a lot of other parallels when we talk about when people lose their faith. A lot of times they go through these phases and they want to hold on to something and they want it to be secure. And geez, I got to believe in something, and you just feel like you're just cold and in the out there, left to nature, and you're not protected if you if you reject God. You don't have that Jesus blanket to protect you anymore.
Yeah, I try to I guess compare my story. I had never had any belief at all, and so we've had this conversation a few times, and I always love to go with Nietzsche's "Thus spoke there Zarathustra" about the camel, the lion, and then the child. Is that that three phase transition between like the beast of burden to the angry lion to the child who's ready to learn after you're done being so pissed off at everything. It's just a cool analogy that I usually use, but I missed the first one. I missed the first one, and I went from like I was just pissed off about like this is bull, and then I moved on into the child and wanting to learn stuff. And so like it's a cool place that we can finally meet. And I usually find that people, once they get past those first couple of stages, and they're finally like, okay, I get it. We kind of need to find something to work on, all of us together, as opposed to this is the one I like. This is the one I like. And so like I guess if you still need that one thing that you need to hang on to find as a replacement or whatever, like it can slowly evolve into like you can replace it with the willingness to learn, the eagerness to finding out more and more throughout society, as opposed to needing some kind of like crutch, I guess, would be to lean on. Is that kind of where you're going with this, or is it more?
That's where I'm going with this.
Good. Good.
For me, I was always an atheist myself,
Really?
So I didn't get that until I started reading more and more, getting into Rothbard and Mises, and started listening to a little bit of Hayek on YouTube as much as I can. He has such a thick accent. And then I came to this point where things got scary. I was left with very little to hang on to. They kept on pointing out these flaws, and because I started out liberal, then I moved to classical liberal, and now I'm kind of flirting with anarchy right now. If I'm going to be, we're among friends now. It's okay, right?
We're not going to string you up in the street. It's all good.
And when I started thinking about these ideas, it's kind of scary to think, oh my God, I'm on my own. This is the kind of thing in the back of the mind that was really keeping me thinking that I need to have the government to protect me. But then now I'm starting to think the government is the very thing that is the danger, the number one danger, the thing that potentially there is something to do about. There's very little I can do about the weather. There's very little I can do about so many other things in life. But maybe humanity is big enough to do something about this problem of government. And it's still hard to kind of abandon that blanket, the government blanket. Those are the kind of things that I think about all the time. That's all I wanted to say about that. I was going to talk about personality traits and the interesting.
Well, this could be something. I mean, I noticed that you had a lot of stuff also in the outline. This is something we could come back on, because I would say that libertarianism is something that we could definitely spend a little bit more time on to help people kind of figure out what version of the political compass that they're on. If they're down deep in the bottom left, as Tanner is, if they're a little bit more upper into the middle, as I am, or they're probably leaning a little bit more towards your direction. I honestly think this is a good conversation to have, and we have enough material here that we could talk more again in the future. And so I guess the big thing would be is when we can get you back on. Since you're local, we can just find you. We'll throw you in a van. We'll bring you out here. We'll tie you, dump you in the garage. But we've got a couple other segments that are going to be a lot of fun tonight. I was going to talk about Darwin's Finches. So you mentioned evolution a few times. This will be a fun conversation because I think the specifics are important to talk about as far as what people really understand, because we use those examples and things like that all the time. And then there's also a variety of things that we can talk about for as far as is Trump a serious contender, and also is feminism a tool, or why men need feminism too. And so we got some other topics. We'll see if we can get them all in, because this was a nice long segment. But Tanner, you want to hit us out? I know you got some music just blaring in the background of your headphones there. You always do.
I always do. I always got the music going up in here. You know how it works in this house. We got music is going loud. We got some great and square, and we'll disagree with Ishmael, who does not like rating. I don't know why. I don't get it. And as we wrap the segment up and we walk out of the libertarian segment, I guess the one thing I could take away, Justin, is that we both agree that we need more liberty. The difference is how we're going to get there. Your belief in that your belief in that by regulating and stipulating liberty, we're violating too much liberty, and in the end, that's not going to be the way that we should go about this. But to me, I disagree with that. I think we need more regulation in some aspects of our life. In other aspects, I don't. You know, I think we should deregulate drugs, 100%. I think we should get rid of the institutionalized jails that we have. I think we should get rid of a lot of the lobbying that we see in Congress. I don't like any of that. I think we should get rid of that. But I think the only way to get rid of that sometimes is through government intervention, is through social programs, is through a way of making people as equal as we can. And to argue about your $15,000 sandwich, which is an article that you had posted, and again, for everybody listening,
Make me a sandwich.
We will post everything, every link that he has into our description. So you guys can go ahead and read every article that we have. Because we don't want to tell you, hey, you should believe our way, or you should believe Justin's way. We want to give you the option to figure it out on your own. But I think one of the key things here is that, and I'm going to quote one of the articles, it says, let society's legal apparatus remove all obstacles the best it can. Permit these creative know-hows to flow freely. But let's have faith that free men and women will respond to the invisible hand. This faith will be confirmed. I, pencil, seemingly simple though I am, offer the miracle of my creation as a testimony that this is practical faith, as practical as the sun, the rain, the cedar tree, and the good earth. And maybe I just don't have as much faith, if you want to call it that, or hope, that society is going to do things. Because we're going to get into Trump in a few minutes, and we're going to have that conversation about Trump. We're going to have the conversation about what happens if you have to split a two-party system at some point. But I just don't see the benefit of going to a completely libertarian society. I don't see the point in moving away from a regulation, because there is unfair things. And if we have to live in a society today where my kids have to grow up with better advantages than black kids, that's fucked up. That's fucking bullshit.
Well, we better get Justice Scalia out of there then.
Yeah, I agree with that too. Why should my kids get an advantage because they're fucking white? They grew up in a middle class system, and they have grandparents that grew up in a high upper class system. That's wrong. Yeah, my parents worked hard, but that doesn't mean that the average black person doesn't work hard either. I've got people I work with. I got a guy that I would love to promote, but because there's this institutionalized, well, you know, he's from a temp agency, well, look at his history record. But look, he's worked for me for 3 weeks now. Great individual, very intelligent, somebody that should be promoted. And unfortunately, in our society, I have to help promote him because we can't just accept that maybe he's an intelligent, rational being that needs to exist because of our fucking cognitive biases. So I'll tell you what, libertarianism will succeed when we can fucking get rid of cognitive biases. So we'll be right back with more Cellar Door Skeptics right here on the only fucking network where you can swear and you can hear Chris Hanna and Chris Tanner bitch about life. We'll be right back, everyone.
Hey, this is Keith.
And this is Jen, and we're from Not Another Atheist Podcast.
You're listening to Cellar Door Skeptics.
Join the revolution.
Looking for something new and exciting, or maybe just a change from the old atheist show format? Cellar Door Skeptics Podcast provides listeners with hours of enjoyment each week on Spreaker and iTunes. Check us out as we talk politics, religion, science, reviews of books and music, along with the occasional interview just for a twist. Join Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna every Tuesday night at 8 p.m. Eastern as they bring fresh content to you. Walk with us through the cellar door as we help you prepare for the revolution. You can find us on Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and even on Facebook.
Now, back to the show.
Man, what a ride it has been. Thank you, everybody, so much for sticking around for another episode of Cellar Door Skeptics, as we've tackled a little bit more of a political show than we normally do. We normally try and mix it up quite a bit, but we're pretty politically handed today. We just had an awesome segment on libertarianism, and you got to learn why, for the most part, I can't be associated with it. and why I'm a socialistic libertarian, where the libertarian part is such a small slice of my life that it's almost not worth mentioning at this point.
It's a blend like a good whiskey. It's just the way these things work.
It's not a good whiskey. A good whiskey goes down smooth, stays down, and makes you enjoy the whole bottle. The libertarian side, I can't say as much, but we're going to end on a positive note tonight. We're going to end on something. We talk about science all the time, and we talk about how, as a show, we want to educate others, and we want to contribute to society. And sometimes we don't know how to do that other than donating money and listening to Chris talk about science as he gets to educate not only me, but the listener. But tonight, this is a special science segment, and I kind of say this every time, so I probably sound like a fucking broken record, explicit tag included. We get to talk about one of my favorite subjects, evolution, because evolution is one of those topics that came up in high school when I first went to a public school, and it's one of those topics that I actually enjoyed because it helped debunk some of the bad science that I learned as a child through religion. And a lot of people will say, well, evolution is just natural. You should just understand this. You should just know this. But it was one of those things I had to go out of my way to learn. And I very, very enjoy discussing evolution. And Chris is going to introduce us to some bare base bones, some of the beginning aspects of evolution with Darwin's Finches.
Yeah, I don't know if it's so much introducing, but I mean, so I had to stop everything for a second. So, what didn't you say you went to a religious school back in the day? So you were introduced to evolution back then, or was it when you went into?
It was when I went to the public school. We did not talk about evolution in the Christian school.
Wow. No. One of the examples
that would have to been a Catholic school if that was, and my parents were very anti-Catholic.
That's an interesting take on the. I guess the different sects on they don't really like each other, which is never really a surprise to a non-believer. But I was going to say that really surprised me that you had gotten some evolutionary training in school when it was a religious school. But let's face it, the public schools are where this belongs. We all know, if we have been educated in evolution, we know of Darwin's Finches. It's an example that's used. Now, did you see the Darwin's Finch example in the first textbooks and the stuff that you dealt with, or was it?
Yeah, actually, yes. In the first biology books that we went through, Darwin's Finches was in there. It wasn't.
It wasn't very in depth.
Yeah. A lot of the evolution side was not. The book played it off as it was common knowledge almost, and it kind of it didn't go into an extreme depth about how evolution plays such an intricate role in our lives, almost more than a god would.
It's one of the things that I find that I really wish this is not a really, really difficult example for people to learn more about. This is something that you hear regularly when people talk about evidence for evolution, because it's such a simple one. Because everyone's always looking for the transitional fossils for different versions of the Homo sapiens and the Homo erectus and everything. Those are very personal, very emotional, very intense examples that we run into, and it's very difficult to help people see when to separate themselves from the problem. But the evolution that we can see in the Galapagos Islands, there's some really great turtle examples that you can also, the tortoise examples that you can also use. But the one that I've heard the most, and the one that I had always kind of accepted without really doing a lot of research, was the Finch example. And what it is an example of adaptive radiation. So what that is the process in which organisms diversify rapidly into a multitude of new forms, particularly when a change in the environment makes new resources available. It creates new challenges or opens new environmental niches. Now, the key word here is going to be niches. We'll hear this a few times in here, but to start, we're going to have a link in this. So if you're listening to this, you can go to the link and pause the video or pause the podcast. And
video.
It's not video anymore. I'm still stuck on that from our old YouTube
He
days.
still doesn't wear his pants. It doesn't matter whether we are on podcast or video. Chris Hanna doesn't wear his pants.
Yeah, and so this is a link to the YouTube video.
He doesn't even address it. You're not even addressing me, accusing you of not wearing pants. I have to interrupt your science segment at least one point throughout.
Okay,
it.
Evolution does not require pants. We'll deal with this in the future.
Are you sure? Are you sure about that?
This awesome group, HHMI Bio Interactive, put out a video for the Galapagos Finch evolution, and it's included in the links that we've got here. And it's a really nice 16-minute video that covers this, and it covers a few of the things that you're really going to want to know, as well as it's a visual representation. It really helps you see what's happening, because like I said, it's an example that a lot of people use in the arguments for evolution, but we don't really see the examples, or it doesn't really go into depth. I had never gone fully into depth, and so I wanted to do this, and in doing that, I teach myself usually, because Charles Darwin was on the HMS Beagle. That was his big 5-year voyage, and it was in September of 1835 that he landed on the Galapagos Islands. He spent 5 weeks there, and he collected all kinds of specimens. I mean, there's tons of really great stuff on the Galapagos Islands, and he took a whole bunch of these little birds in, and he didn't think they were important. He didn't even realize that they were different. They looked like closely related species of finch, but he didn't think that they were anything important. And once he got them back to London, he was having ornithologists look at this stuff, and they were like, "What's going on? What are all these birds?" He didn't even record where he collected them. It was just he had learned how to preserve birds, and that's just what he took back with him. And so I guess once he realized that there was something of an issue here, that they said there's something going on, that the Galapagos Islands have been considered a living laboratory. And so he re-examined what he was seeing and the evidence that he had in his hands. And one of the big things that I really like about the Galapagos Islands is that they're only 3 to 5 million years old. And only a few million years ago, these species of finch migrated there. And so this is a young situation. So we talked a little bit about the macro and the microevolution stuff earlier while Justin was here. Chris and Justin and I, just kind of the definitionary stuff about the macro and micro. So pretty much your perspective is that there is no difference between macro and micro. We should talk about speciation versus those two distinctions to help people understand it better?
Yes. I mean, yes. There is technically a difference between micro and macro, but not enough that it really makes a difference. They are the same thing. They're just on a different scale. I always kind of see it as, a 20-ounce drink versus a big gulp. They're the same thing. They can contain the same material. They're going to quench your thirst in the exact same amount of way, and they're going to get you the same answer or the same satisfaction level, no matter which way you play it. The difference is what scale they're on. And I think a lot of people miss that fact about evolution. People miss the fact that they're the same thing. And so if you support microevolution, you're supporting macroevolution all in the same. And I call speciation, what I call that is a cross bridge. And that's a dumb term maybe, because, and maybe I've just worked too much, Chris. Maybe I've spent way too much fucking time, because our system at work, our SAP system, doesn't talk to the other SAP system in distribution, and they have to create a cross bridge between the two for the two damn things to talk together. Well, in a sense, micro and macro evolution are the same thing. There's a cross bridge that goes between the two that links them all together, and that's speciation. And I don't think I can say that word right.
Yeah,
but,
speciation is when it's when you can no longer interbreed. So you have let's say one group goes to an island, and that group is completely and forever isolated from the mainland, which is exactly what happened, relatively speaking. Not perfectly isolated, but isolated in a big enough number that the mainland of South America and the finches that made it to the Galapagos Islands, they were there and separated long enough that they were no longer able to interbreed. They were not able to have kids between the two. So the mainlanders versus the islanders could not have children. And so that is the speciation difference. That's the first speciation. There's at least 13 species of finch that have evolved from that single ancestor from the mainland, making that a grand total of 14 different species of finch that would exist. And so they still have the original. There's 3 species of ground-dwelling seed eaters, 3 others of living on cacti and eating seeds, and then there's 1 living in trees eating seeds, and then 7 different species of tree-dwelling insect eaters. They act almost like woodpeckers. They break the wood and they suck out maggots and larvae and things along those lines. And so there's a variety of the things that they eat. And this is the key thing. This is that niche stuff that I was talking about. Because upon genetic analysis, today the species of finches found in the Galapagos Islands are more closely related to each other on all of those islands. So all the species that you can find on those islands are more closely related to each other than they are from the one that's on that mainland. And so that is a better example for the speciation that we were talking about in the shorter term because of these food groups and the different like I said a moment ago, that the Galapagos have been called a living laboratory. They're very simplified. They're very clean. There's not a ton of crazy factors, and so we can see these events happening, and it's a better way to judge, to see the evolutionary aspects. Because what happened is, when each process, one species gives rise to multiple species that exploit different niches. That's called adaptive radiation. And so speciation is when two groups of the same species are isolated long enough, and they like I said, they can no longer reproduce. But the video that I have also linked in here from the HHMI, they talk about there's two ways this can happen: from segregation, so like isolation, there's two groups and they never talk to each other again. But there's also a really cool one that I did not know about, and I'm comfortable saying that when the food sources would change and their beaks would change, maybe their colors change a little bit, when they would kind of get back together after a short period of time being separate, those little changes made them less likely to try to reproduce with the other. And so they would only try to reproduce with finches that were similar to them. And so if you had a little bit bigger body or you had a bigger beak, the smaller grass seed smaller ones with the skinnier beaks, they wouldn't do their pompous little mating dance. And so they simply stopped trying to mate with the ones that were similar to them, or that are ones that were different than them. So we have the segregation, the isolation from geometric or geological differences, in location or whatever. But you also have a psychological thing. There's a mental thing that's happening between these things. They're actually just staying away from each other because they're not similar enough, and that furthers that evolutionary aspect. So it pushes them further and further away, which I had never heard of. Have you ever heard of anything besides just the two groups never communicate with each other?
No, I had heard that they didn't have a desire typically, and for me it's usually the speckled or the spotted fish or whatever the hell they call that. That's usually the big example that I use or that I see more than the finches. The finches are kind of, there's something I probably should have paid attention to and probably should learn about.
It's taken for granted a little bit.
Yeah, it's something that's so popularized. I got sick of having to use that argument with fucking theists. Typically it's the theists I got to argue with about evolution, honestly.
Well, the video is it's a nice video, and it's Peter and Rosemary Grant. They spent the last 40 years. Every summer they go to the Galapagos, and this is where we're going to talk a little bit more about specifically what changes these birds. They see different climatic conditions from year to year, dramatically altering the food supply, and that's the thing. That's the niche. Whether or not you can get food is whether or not you can survive. So these certain finches have lived on or died, depending on which species' beak structure was best adapted for the most abundant food of the time. And the cool thing is, in 1 or 2 generations, just a couple of birth cycles, we see consistently, statistically, a change overall in the beak sizes for certain areas when there's a variety of finches as opposed to one finch on one little island. When there's a variety of finches that are competing for food, the ones that are best adapted for the food source that's available are usually the ones that are that beak size is the most prevalent in the next 1 or 2 birth cycles. The ecological niches that we're talking about exert something called selection pressures, and that's what pushes populations in various directions. So in times of drought or excessive rain, the food sources vary. That would determine which species of finch is successful. So like after a drought, all the vegetation on these islands, because they're newly formed volcanic islands, they created small seeds. All the vegetation that created small seeds died. They didn't have enough water, and so there was cacti, and there was these plants that had really big, hard seeds. Well, the only large beaked finches were able to break into these big seeds. So in the video, it says there was a noticeable increase in large beak size. It was 4% overall population. In just 1 year, there's an increase of 4%. Like, it's not really a big number, but if you look at the overall population for major size species, that would be a big number. And so the exact opposite happened for the El Nino rain surplus a few years later. All the vegetation was just overrun with vines and things that made small seeds. Well, the big beaks finches couldn't get their big beaks into the small spaces where these small seeds and small grassy seeds were, and so the opposite effect happened. And so we've seen ups and downs in 2 different very scientifically measured examples of slow evolution happening in a very quick manner. And so, just adding 30, 40, 50, 100, 200 years to affect this quickly, you can see how new species would be formed. It's a really cool, I guess, real-time thing, because it's one of the things that we always talk about. It's like evolution is so slow that you can't see it, and it's terrible because long time sucks. Let's face it. I don't know. What do you think that we can really ever see something like, I talk about dogs being all the same species, but we see like these micro evolutions in different breeds. But I don't know. Do you think that if we sat on it long enough, that if we watched these finches, that we could ever see like actual new species in real time forming?
In terms of the finches, it might be a little bit longer. That's going to be a lot harder, I think, to happen because they have a longer lifehood. I guess if you want to call it lifeline, whatever the fuck you want to call it, they have a longer timeline than something like a speckled fish or mold or bacteria. That's the problem. And so bacteria, it's easy, right? It takes, let's say, 10 days or something like that, and then it dies out. You can see millions of generations of bacteria evolve because of the fact that it's easier to relocate that timeline to our life.
Its life cycle is so fast. We can see it ups and downs, and we can make small changes and just see 30, 40, 50 generations in maybe a few weeks, a few months or something like that. Yeah. So there was one other cool thing that I saw 3 terms that they're pretty interesting as far as what we're talking about when it comes to these kinds of finches and the kinds of evolution. There's this thing called peripatric, which is a species where the ranges are close but don't overlap. So we know that the finches ranges definitely overlap. So this isn't the kind of speciation we're talking about. And then there's another one called allopatric. This is where the same species is cut off from another colony of the same species, in which case they genetically diverge over time. So this is the random mutations, and it slowly over time will just create a new species when they're separate for long enough. And this can be the case for the original finch population in the mainland and the new population in the Galapagos. So that first transition, that longest one. And then there's the last one is called sympatric. And this is where different species arise from the same source of genetic code while occupying the same area. So when food sources are low and species have to find food sources to survive, you'll hear the word niche. And like I said before, this is the niche thing. This is the sympatric stuff. This is what the Galapagos finches are dealing with. The ones that could utilize alternative food sources to thrive in the area are the ones that could use any old resource, may survive because they have chosen something else, or they have an extra tool or something. These are the really important specifics of why Darwin's finches worked, and the examples they used, and the measurements and the statistics that they had, and that's why Darwin looked at this stuff and realized, okay, there is something here. There's a natural selection process happening, and it doesn't seem that nature is this mindless robot who's crushing and destroying out of just cold-hearted destructiveness. It even though it is a non-anthropomorphological thing, it's not. It doesn't have a human characteristics. It doesn't have emotions. It doesn't have feelings. It's still making choices as a non-sentient thing. It makes decisions as to who succeeds and who fails. And you can see this in real time in the Galapagos finches if you just take a look at these specific examples and learn a little bit more about the basics. And that's really, because if you're going to talk about the finches being examples and evidence for evolution, we need to know why. We need to know little specifics, and then we can help explain it a little bit better.
Yeah, and I think all of that is great, Chris. And I think this was a great lesson. This was something that we were able to enjoy. So this was a fun topic for me. I enjoyed this. I like this.
I'm sad at myself for not having gone into it deeper earlier on.
Yeah, and I would agree with you. And it was one of those things I overlooked. And even with the public education that I got and all the different avenues I could venture into evolution, this is one I always avoided because it was just it felt cliche to me. But as Chino says from the Death Tones, and he says change in the House of Flies, and he talks about a fly changing. It's an evolution. Evolution fits in all of our lives. Evolution balances things out. Evolution makes things to the point where we can understand it. It's almost like a new natural law to me. It's almost like, hey, we found the new gravity, for fuck's sake. And maybe I'm going out on a limb. Maybe I'm being crazy. Maybe I'm just stepping out and saying, hey, you know what? This is real. This is more important than fucking religion. This is more important than anything else. And evolution could give us a grasp on humanity. And if we want to wrap it all up, we want to bring it all back home, right? Libertarianism uses the base level of evolution, which is why I have a hard time with accepting just base level libertarianism.
It just feels
But when you couple it with humanism, when you couple it with where we're at today, when you couple it with socialism, and you take a great mix, as Chris said earlier, you got to have a mix of the two. You can't just have one. You have to have a mix of the two. But when you mix the two, what do we get? The next evolution in human nature. Thanks so much for sticking around for this great episode of Cellar Door Skeptics. It's probably a little longer than last episode, so send us an email. Tell us if you like it. Tell us if you don't like it. Tell us what you want to hear. Tell us if you want a science segment covered. Tell us, for fuck's sake. Tell us.
And
Damn it, I'm shaking the windows. Tell us. Tell us what you want. Because Chris will do the research, and I'll mock him a little bit and learn, because that's what I do.
You can remind us of the spots we didn't edit out from when we were shooting the shit earlier or something, or we have a coughing fit or something. Just tell us where we made a mistake, and we'll deal with it.
Yeah. So as we end the show out and we move on to the rest of our evenings, thank you so much for joining us tonight, and we appreciate all the support you've given us. You can check us out on Not Another Atheist Podcast. It aired last week, Friday. You can check out Chris's origin story as well as my ghost stories. We talk about ghost hunting, for fuck's sake. That's entertaining. That's pretty good, right? So check them out, and make sure you also check out Paleo Radio, as they have done some intros for us and would be more than happy to do intros for your podcast. Next week, we've got a great show next week. We're going to talk a little bit about Jesus? Bethlehem? Seriously? Do the two go together? Does it mix? We're going to have that conversation. We're also going to talk a little bit about surviving the holidays. If fracking is bad, and hell, we're going to probably do a segment on pot. This has been Christopher Tanner and Chris Hanna signing out for Cellar Door Skeptics. Make sure you prepare for the revolution. Good night, everyone.
You've been listening to a presentation of Cellar Door Skeptics. Check us out on Spreaker, cellardoorskeptics.com.